Hello, this is Silas. I'm back here with Steven to finalize our series. Say what's up to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
And this is a conversation that we've been having about the book Cracks in the Ivory Tower, The Moral Mess of Higher Education, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, I remembered it right. This is we started recording this some time back, and now we're finally getting to the conclusion of it as we wind up that series. I'm still going to probably post number 11. No, number 11 has been posted, so the last one has been posted. This one will be posted soon. Okay, before getting into this, there were some technical issues while recording this. This is about a 3 hour long conversation, but halfway through, I figured out how to fix them. So this first part is going to have some pauses with me adding the explanations. Then the second part will be released without those issues. Tell us a bit
Sure.
about this book and why we've been reading this and this series and this whole thing.
Sure. So as we've been discussing, this book is exploring the various economic and ethical issues in our higher education system, that is the colleges and universities. It's getting into issues as far as the way things are funded, the classes college students have to take without their consent. The professors have a lot of self-interest and will push for things that benefit them, but those costs are imposed on other people, et cetera, et cetera. And again, I'll touch on in this last section. I sort of have had my own commentary as well. The book itself does not focus so much on the political ideology taught in academia, but I'm going to touch on it here. And again, I sort of have, but that's more my own commentary. This book was written to be sort of something that anyone can read, not be a us versus them thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing. When people talk about critiques about certain things, people say if you're critiquing this, you must
Yeah.
support this. Like we just had a
Yeah.
recent exchange on Stephen's wall where he was talking about certain thing to do with politics and the voting system, and he's like, okay. So you're against everyone participating in this? Like, no, me pointing out an issue with the way certain people in this system participate in it doesn't mean I'm against anyone doing it. Even though in some cases, in this case, I'll tell you my bias. I against this whole idea of compulsory schooling education where we compulsory have to go through K through 12, compulsory now making it almost compulsory for certain people, at least mentally they think it's compulsory, that if you don't go to this college in this current system, you're not going to actually be successful. So that's some kind of thing like I can talk about and say like, look, the system itself, education, something we care about, something we like, but is the current system actually the best that we can do when it comes to actually achieving the ostensible goal of educating people to be more productive and able to live in society? And I do think that that's not really necessarily what's happening.
No.
And with our entire series, I can't go ahead and listen to the content. I think a lot of you listen to this might have listened to some of them before, or if you find there to be some objectionable things that we do in this last review conclusion type of talk we're going to have now, we will be referring back to some of the things back then, and you can go back in and see where we're wrong, see where these authors were wrong, and set us straight.
Yeah, and my commentary on that is always something like, don't just blindly follow what we say or what the authors say. Do your own homework too. But one of my ongoing criticisms is something like, if you keep saying the system's great and there's all this stuff saying it's not, you have to explain why this is wrong. You just saying it's great because you had a good experience or you know someone who did or some other anecdotal thing, it doesn't really prove anything because anyone can pick an anecdote to prove what they want. We're trying to look at the bigger picture. Yeah.
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 And this is now just about education, about information. And we have to think of the current system that in the West, this is a book that focuses on the West, and the talk hasn't been focused on that. But we are a global community now. We are becoming increasingly globalized. I am, when it comes to human civilization, human society, I am a globalist in that sense. And I think going towards that, I think it was an improvement when we left being just families, being small clans and tribes, and we formed little villages and clans and things like that. Then we moved to towns and townships and regions and different kind of associations. Then we got up to what was it like states? Not before we had the massive states, but just
Well,
like
there's
the
the
state.
polis. Like in ancient Greece, there was the polis. It's like it's not
Yeah,
exactly city-state because they said that many of them had cities. Some were not states technically. Some were country areas, but it was basically like a common area where everyone sort of ruled. Yeah.
yes. And we've seen these, and there's been constant improvements. There's been some issues as these newer forms of thinking were, but I don't know anyone who might even say they're not a globalist who would truly be saying that they want to go back to some level where we're just random families and tribes living in no contact with other people. It's how the globalization is happening. That's a similar thing here. I am for education. I'm for the spread of it. And this is an increase of it. And this is something that will be adopted by the rest of the world. They look at the United States of America, despite the current situation that's going through right now. Some people, it's a banana republic. No, it's not. Stop that. So looking at some of the successes in the United States of America and say, we want that for our people. We want that for ourselves, for our families. So let's get that kind of educational system. Let's get that kind of system here. And is the system that they're actually like getting from the United States of America, that's what this entire thing has been. Is that an actual blueprint, this ivory tower? Is that a blueprint that you want to actually use? Are we even still, is it a facade? Is it just the outside? It looks good, but in the interior, there's a cracks, it's going to crumble. So you don't want to have to rebuild that. And we see this with politics happening. People look at developing countries. This is something that I did when I was a lot younger. I would look and say, why are developing country leaders adopting the systems and ways of governing that failed, that from years back, from decades back in the West, that was shown to be a failure, and they're doing it again. I used to think the West was importing it, but it was no. It was the people, I think it was the leaders in Africa, where some of them also were educated and experienced time living in the West in the past, when those systems of governments that then failed once they moved back to Africa and started entering politics there. There's two things with that. So that might be one of the processes they did to get to that point. And also, it's just a path of least resistance. They can maintain power without having to convince and provide a certain product that was good enough for the people. So they kept that power. Yet in the United States of America, people had the history and had seen that and be like, okay, we're not going to do that kind of corrupt government anymore. We need something better. So that's the same way with the education system. I feel like that's being copied as well. A lot of people are looking at the United States of America. Maybe they were in school there, like I went to school there, and then they're like, okay, they remember how they were, the experience they had in school, and then they're like, oh, let's do that for our country as well. And will that lead to the same kind of moral mess? Whether you're anti the current president or for the president coming in after, when it comes down to it, the society and the culture that you live in is in part one that had, I think, I don't know what it is in the United States of America, I might have to check, but I think a good 40% of all the people in the United States of America have been through the compulsory K through 12 at least. And then as we discussed, I think it was a much smaller percentage. The percentage of people that actually have gone to college is probably a lot lower than most people think. It's not 40%. But I'll double check that. Any other thoughts?
I'll touch on this partway into the discussion, but one of the things I was just thinking of too, it's sort of the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy of, well, the United States is a wealthy country. They have such and such education system. Therefore, it's wealthy because of that. And of course, I'll touch on it again later in the discussion, but a lot of our great entrepreneurs, they didn't go to high school, college. Some didn't even finish elementary school. So it's you have to look at what other factors created all this wealth that allowed people to study all these other things that don't have much market value, but because we're a wealthy country, people can go and study those for fun, essentially. All right.
Yeah, and that's the key. Like when the people drop out, and I know people who don't want to go to school, who are anti-school in certain ways. I think that goes like I think there was one, like the three main hoaxes. There's things in this book. The great thing about this book is it's there's things I learned that I thought, there's things that I'd heard people say that they gave me some different kind of ways of looking at it. One of the things that has been a pet peeve of mine is people look at they look at the dropouts. They look at the Mark Zuckerbergs. I think Bill Gates dropped out as well.
Yeah,
they look at some of these luminaries and say, oh, they dropped out. That's why I don't have to go to college. And like, you don't have to go to college, but that's not a good example because these people found things to do. It's like pointing out to an NFL player who didn't get his degree. And he's like, oh, that guy dropped out. That's why I don't have to go to college. It's like, yeah, well, he's also like 0.0001% like genetic freak of humanity. And he has a way to make millions of dollars. Like the point of college ostensibly is to educate somebody so they can be a productive member of society and enrich their lives. So there's many different ways of doing that. But to look at the minority of people that happened to do it, happened to drop out and were millionaires, and they dropped out because, not because they were just frustrated with the system, not because they couldn't cut in the system, but because they had already found something else to pursue, that the system itself, even if the system worked to its utmost perfection, was not going to be able to provide a chance anywhere close to as lucrative and productive as these things. And that is such a small percent, because why would you take that 0.0001% of college dropouts that happen to be millionaires and happen to be really successful and use that to judge the 99.99% of them that might have dropped out for different reasons? Maybe they were unable, maybe the system itself chewed them up and messed them up to a point they couldn't do it. Maybe they couldn't hack it, because some of these systems are positive, as we've discussed. There's many things in schools that are still very positive, that when we're doing this great reset of ours, let's build back a better form of education. Yeah. So I think that's kind of something that to have in mind.
All right, so I'll just jump right in, because some of the there were some points I was.
One second, sorry. I think you should read. I'll read the chapter list. Sure. I think before we get into that. And sure. Okay, it says. I just checked this up. It says 1997, 1960. Is it 97? I don't know. Was going to expand statistics. I'm trying to find like the percentage of people that have percentage of population in the United States of America who completed high school, more from 1960 to 2019 by gender. I'm seeing, okay, so 2019, hey, it's a lot higher than I thought. So 90.5% to 89.6%. So if a country says, oh, America is doing better, and objectively the United States of America is wealthier, people seem to be doing better in general than most countries in the world, and a country is developing and wants to become like that, they'll think, oh, we need to do this. And then now for the inverse, for the people who have problems with the United States of America, who say we need more educated like people, well, your system has had 90.5% of the females and 89.6% of the males have been through the compulsory educational system in your country, and the country is still the way that it is. So if you're happy with the way the country is, then maybe to fix it, all we got to do is get that number up to 95% or to 100%. But if you have some frustrations,
it's sort of like that debate with the mask mandates, where they've said, oh, well, the mask mandates aren't working because people aren't wearing them. But what percentage? It's a small percentage. And they said, I think they've showed polls that 85% of Americans are fine with wearing masks. And then they'll highlight some story where, oh, this one person didn't wear a mask in a store. This person didn't wear a mask in a store. And it's like, you realize one or two people doing that is not going to cause the virus to spread everywhere, right?
That's the thing. I don't think they do realize that. I think that's part of the thing. Okay, now educational attainment in the United States of America. It says I think high school diploma GED. Yeah, that's age 25 or over. 90. It was 92.5%. Some college 61.28%. Age 25 and over. And then age 25 and 30 to 30 is 66 to 34%. Associated bachelor's degree 45%, then 46%. I'm just going to round it up. Bachelor's degree, and this is for ages 25 and over, 35%, and then age 25 to 35 to 30. I don't know why there's age 25 and over, then age 25 to 30.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, so I'll just go with the higher number. So bachelor's degree is 37%. Master's and doctorates, that's the one that was 9%, 9%, 13%, 9%. So between that, and then doctorate and professional degree was 3.47% for age 25 and over. Then age 25 to 30 was 2%. Or is this like, and then doctorate, this is 2.3% for age 25 and over, and then age 25 to 30, 1.2%. So I think that might have been saying like when they actually attain them, but that's how small the actual number actually is for the thing. It's not as high as some think, and I think the one number is a lot higher than most think. If you tell people like how many people have college degrees, I think people would say a lot lower than high school degrees. Sorry, I think people would say a lot lower. At least I thought it was lower just from offhand, and I don't think many people would say 90%.
Yeah, I don't know.
So yeah, that's kind of where we're at in that sudden situation, and these are things that people are going to want. I see there's going to be more education, not less education, in the near future. So let's see about how that's going to happen. And I think we're going to be concluding that. And to do that, I think this conversation has been reading by different chapters, and this will be the 13th part.
Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to remember now. Because there was the intro, but there was also we did the one explaining the 7 economic insights, the economic normative and descriptive business questions, and then I'm trying to think. And then, yeah, I guess there was the intro. So yeah, it sounds about right.
So I had another issue with the connections here, so I'm going to read you the list of the chapters like I did in the start of all these conversations. Number 1 was Neither Gremlins Nor Poltergeists. Number 2 was What Academics Really Want. Number 3 was Why Most Academic Advertising is Immoral Bullshit. Number 4 was On Reading, Entrails, and Student Evaluations. Number 5, Grades, Communication Breakdown. Number 6, When Moral Language is a Cover for Self-Interest. Number 7, The General Education Hustle. Number 8, Why Universities Produce Too Many PhDs. Number 9, Cheaters, Cheaters Everywhere. Number 10, 3 Big Myths About What's Plaguing Higher Education. Number 11, Answering the Taxpayers. And then now getting back into what Stephen was saying.
All right, so again, let's review those arguments, chapters 2 through 9. I'm not going to state one because I think the other arguments basically prove it. So, 2, faculty, administrators, and students have selfish interests and face bad incentives that may induce them to act in ways that undermine the common good of the university. I think we've proven that. Chapter 3. Universities regularly advertise in negligent advertising. They promise to deliver a wide range of benefits but lack evidence to prove that they deliver those benefits. Worse, researchers have uncovered strong evidence that universities don't simply deliver on some of their promises. Most students learn close to nothing, don't develop their skills very much, and don't know how to transfer their skills outside of a classroom. I think that's been proven. Chapter 4. Administrators use student evaluations to determine hiring and promotion, but student evaluations do not track teaching effectiveness. They may also reflect other biases that, ethically speaking, should not be used for hiring and promotion. Chapter 5. Professors haven't coordinated on a common meeting for grades, and GPA calculations are mostly incoherent. The main form of feedback and certification that faculty thus provide to students is a conceptual mess. Definitely. 6. Academics frequently use moral language to disguise their own self-interest. Certain forms of activism, including activism on behalf of tenure, appear to be little more than rent-seeking. Chapter 7. General education generally doesn't work. Faculty exploit students by forcing them to take useless and ineffective courses that students don't want to. The purpose of many general education courses is to transfer money from students to professors. Chapter 8. Professors and administrators maintain low-quality doctoral programs that produce too many PhDs and gutted employment markets as a way to increase their own prestige, obtain subsidized graders and assistants, and justify higher salaries and more resources. Definitely. And no, Chapter 9, most students cheat a little, some cheat a lot. Again, we didn't touch on Chapter 10, which is answering the taxpayers, but that was all addressed anyway. So then I would say here, this is barely scratching the surface. The authors and we didn't even get much into how much professors use their positions for political activism. This doesn't get into sexual harassment and professors having relationships with students. This doesn't get into all the issues with student teams and compensating athletes. I keep thinking of that South Park episode with Cartman and the slave trade and exploiting student athletes. We haven't explored whether colleges are too paternalistic towards students or don't prepare them enough for the real world. We haven't gotten into whether admission practices are fair or biased. We touched a little on affirmative action and things, but again, we didn't delve deeply into that. So the authors chose to ignore these points for 2 reasons. One, they didn't want this to turn into a left versus right thing where it would just people read this and automatically either it confirms their biases or they dismiss it because it goes against or confirms their ideology. And 2, some of these issues are secondary, such as sports. The purpose of this book was more the economic and academic aspects of academia. So the bottom line is that colleges are not staffed with bad people, but rather structured with bad incentives. If you want to fix the universities, you need to fix the incentives. Good luck with that. So that ends the book itself. Next, I'm going to talk about some alternatives and some supplementary reading material, which I think relates well to this. Silas, do you have anything to comment before I continue?
Yeah, as I said, with the main academic political biases and different kind of things to involve it to color it's hard to divorce those things from each other. There's things going on, and there's a lot of things where I'm glad to have these kind of conversations because I want to engage with people who are willing to actually have conversations. And I just realized there's a difference with that people who want to talk about certain things versus people who are willing to engage in conversations about certain things.
Sure.
We're to try to preserve as much about this part because there's some good stuff in there. And just showing what I was saying here was during conversation, some really good things come in that unprepared sort of environment. These people have political biases, as I was trying to say at the start. But when it gets to that situation, sometimes people want to preach to you, like you're sitting in a church and you just listen to the preacher say things that you can't really question. They want to speak at you and not necessarily engage in an actual conversation.
Even for me, sometimes some of these videos I make, want to say something to you. I'll try to think of what's out there. And then when I compare that to having conversations, the free flow of ideas and the exchange there, like sometimes I'll come to different realizations. And I think to enable that, I also try to create different personalities in my mind that I can have conversations with to try and break those things apart. Because there's a difference.
There's something I was trying to get at here was there's a difference when you have that free flow of ideas between two or more people. There's other ways to say things. How is this person thinking about this? How would I say it first from these? It helps in that situation. And problems occur not because of what X is, but because of how we define X. So when you have that and you're just using your own definitions and not being asked to define what you mean or understand, or there may be other ways people are looking at these things, you can get to a situation where you talk about something, or you think something in your head and you think you're solving it. You think you're actually providing some solutions when you're not, because there's other ways or there are other things that the people are talking about. And appreciating this conversation with Stephen, in this conversation, we're going to get into actually providing some of our ideas and thoughts on the actual content and hopefully going in to say, okay, we see problems with this. Maybe if you do it like this, and we're opening this up to anybody else out there who's listening. Thank you for listening. And if you're willing to also share some of your ideas and the problems of what we said or the content that we've discussed.
Well, I don't know if you saw Wilfred Riley's the tweet that I shared yesterday. It's something that you and I make fun of a lot, but the people who always say things like, I want to have an honest conversation about race or something, and you know that whole thing is just going to be them berating you about why you should think such and such. So then he made the point, he goes, say things to them like, we should have an honest conversation about crime. Or you could even say, let's have an honest conversation about IQ differences or just differences in people in general or the Pareto principle. I mean, you could pick all sorts of things, and then it's okay. Do you actually want an honest conversation, or do you just want to impose your beliefs on everyone? Because there's a lot of things that you're likely missing too.
So some more frustrations here. If you're watching the video version, I'm going to leave what's going on the screen. I think it was saying some really interesting things here. I was just talking about the different limitations that you have with actually the technology itself. It's not just simply that. Like I was trying a different little setup with the lights and things like that, the pre-production, wondering what I'm going to use. The way things are going to look and appear in a certain way is going to affect the way that people actually get it. Like the camera on the laptop is going to accept the light in a different way, as I was showing at this point, depending on what I'm going to do with the apertures and things like that. If you have better technology, you'll be able to capture it better. Steven got better headphones and things like that, and better mic, which I need to invest into as I get into this to handle some of the technical issues that I had. Simply just looking at what was going right now and making sure the Wi-Fi was in a certain way would help this whole thing. And I even mentioned how in post-production, there's things I can do, like what I'm doing right now is in post-production coming in and adding this part to explain what's going on versus just having a garbled version. Let's say you're watching a live stream, you'd have gotten a completely garbled part, and maybe I would have been able to come in after and say something about it. There was a simple thing like we were discussing, how Stephen was wondering if I could hear the people in the background, just like sometimes when I'm recording, I hear some people in the background where I can actually hear them, but due to the quality of the mic that I was using at the time, no one can actually be picked up on that mic, but even though I can hear them in my ears. So there's some things that I'm experiencing, I'm hearing, that I'm seeing, that even with what we're trying to attempt to give out to you out there viewing, and again, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, are not getting the same thing. You're not getting the same experience. Stephen in these times been frustrated getting into this situation with the slowdowns where I'm thinking I'm saying something to him, but he's not necessarily hearing it because it's freezing up and that kind of thing goes back and forth. So these are some of the things that we deal with. So getting back into this, I was saying, if somebody had an issue with the network or different language and they couldn't understand what I was saying, what would you say?
Nobody says that person is being obstinate and is just ignoring what I'm saying. They understand is the lack of, and to me, that's the conclusion from all these things, from going through this. I think that is far more than anything else than any antagonism, than any bigotry, than any like I hate this person, in anything. It's that lack of understanding that we have, and that lack of understanding that somebody is not, but there's certain limitations to that understanding happening. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I'll start delving in. There's actually three potential solutions that come to my mind. One is a company called Praxis. We've mentioned them a few times, so I'm just going to elaborate a little more on what they are here. So it's a 6-month boot camp. It's hands-on training. What you do is you meet with the Praxis team. I don't know how many of them there are. There used to be only 4 or 5, but they've expanded. Like there's a CEO, there's a business director, there's a marketing director, all this. So you meet with them to learn business skills and produce projects that show you can add value. They have you read certain things. You have to create certain projects. They evaluate them, all that. And then you end up going and working for one of their business partners. Now, part of this is that they vet people because they want to make sure they're sending good young people to these businesses. And also, they really emphasize this is not an internship where you're just going to have to pour coffee and do other bitch work, as they call it. I've talked in a few conversations about certain culinary internships, how that's what a lot of people do. They go there and all you do is peel potatoes, break down chicken, do something like that. And the whole purpose of this is they want people to actually do physical hands-on stuff. They don't want you to just go there and basically, okay, pour coffee for how many months and eventually you'll get some real work. No, they want you to do real things. So the apprenticeship, you typically get paid about $50,000 a year, which starting off for a college age person is decent, I think. And they say about 93% of them end up getting a job for their employer after the fact. Now, the program only does have a 15% acceptance rate. I will admit I actually applied. I did not get in, but they're very selective. Again, 15%. So they're very strict about your resume has to be a certain way. They want you to be able to conduct yourself a certain way, all that. I was disappointed I didn't get in, but I mean, long run, I ended up doing okay, and I'm still sort of in touch with some of them, so I still read their material and follow them. They have a lot of really treasure trove of information as far as how to get a job, how to stand out better, how to network, all that. So they've definitely been very valuable, even if I haven't done the program itself. And the tuition here is only it's $12,000 now. Again, it's not free, but it's also again a tiny fraction of college. And the way it works is if you don't find a job within 6 months of graduating, they give you your money back, which is pretty cool. Now, I think there's different payment plans. Like you can either pay as you go. I think you can defer the payment, things like that. So you don't have to take out a big loan, but it's meant to be affordable for the average person. And they can also defer it till graduation. So I guess I don't know how the legality of that is, but I guess once you have a job, it's okay. You owe them a certain amount of money that you have to pay back or something. So unlike college, they want to make sure you actually find a job. And like I say, 93% end up working for those same employers. So that's a very good sign. And I know there were a few people who did the program who ended up working for the company itself. So it's a very, very, very good program. And again, I like the people. I still follow some of their material. So I always recommend to people. I mean, even if you don't do the program, at least look them up, read the things they wrote, look at their advice. I think it's valuable for everyone. Any thoughts on Praxis before I continue?
Yeah, these are the things. It's when you start looking around, you'll find out that there actually are some options. It's that there's been such a marketing and such a tunnel vision to think that these are the only ways we can actually get this, and this is something that is, I think it's something that is widely shared with community.
Now, he was talking about how certain politicians will come in and start doing certain things because they find it convenient enough for the certain main interests that they have. Now, these interests might not be those that are shared by most of the people. They might be things that change after a while. But once you set up a structure, it works enough to exist that it attracts more people to that. And then when those people come to that thing, they have their own interests as well. They might not find interests in something in the structure that existed only in that structure, but doesn't actually help people.
Joining this system that wasn't in there for the creation of the system, but has found a benefit from some of the fruits of the system will be in there, stick in, and then they'll maintain that part of it. Then you'll start leaning towards that thing, and then mutated effect of the funding of those things. You know, if you tax something, you get less of it. If you fund something, that's fun. What's
If you subsidize something, you get more of it. Yeah.
So that system is being subsidized as well. So there's certain systems that are not as conducive to the way things work. Like I a new thing being posted, like saying which schools what countries are educating the kids the best for the future. Now, I don't know what the actual statistics were actually being taken for this, but there was about 20 countries. The United States of America was like number 3 or 4, lowest on that, and China was the first by like double more than the second highest one. Like, what figures are they actually using? It was like, what country is teaching their kids, educating the kids best for the future workplace or stuff like that, to work in the new economy? I'm like, does that mean we're going towards more of a communist China kind of economy, or anyway? So back, like, this is more acting. It's an educational entrepreneurship type of system, and
So here, had some drop off. Again, apologies. But I was talking about how I was a lecturer here in Kenya at the university, and I was tasked to actually create the entire teaching program, the entire syllabus. And I went to my history of my background, even contacted some of my teachers, and I'm like, okay, can you send me some of the content that you used for your class? And they built something off of that. And then after some time, I decided, hey, let me actually add some online things. Like right now, it's on the screen right now, carbon33.com/education. You can check it out as well. I'm going to be putting some of the content that I developed during that process there. And I was thinking of a system where people can learn and use class material of my own content. And then the material that students use as they learn can then be embedded into the syllabus of it and teach more people in different ways, and can be more modular and other people can use it for their own use. And instead of that whole thing of those who can't teach, I was thinking those who can teach. If you can do something in a certain way and you can show that to other people, people can learn from that. And that's how it was before schools. It was more of a thing where people were just like apprenticeships into actual people and watching actual masters do things who just pass on what they can do to the next people. And with this content, it's there available. Even the teaching material itself, anybody can come and use it. You know, whatever it is that you're learning in different kind of fields, you can do a situation where some people may have studied certain things that they're not using right now, but they could have some free time if they actually have access to some syllabus to offer that time to other people. With this pandemic right now, it's changed the way people are learning in different ways, changed the way people are open to it. So people can come and do like online learning, distance learning. They can do these little pods and come to these things, or you can come to one location at certain amounts of time in your own schedule and actually plug in. Because when people talk about this higher education situation, they want a free higher education type of thing. It's not just free information, because free information is already there online relatively when you actually have access to the internet. And a lot of people actually do that even without them having to pay directly. So what does free education, schooling actually mean?
pretty much we need free room and board for us to go sit and hang out with a bunch of people for about 4 years. That's what you really mean.
Yeah.
If it's free education, free information, that's already available in other ways. So let's be honest about that, and talk about what it actually is.
Well, I was going to say it's
Yeah.
interesting. It's interesting too because Isaac Morehouse, who's the main founder and he was CEO before, he's still involved. I guess I don't know how it works technically, but he actually has a master's degree. Now, some of the other Praxis guys, either I think one finished college, two were actually college dropouts, but Morehouse actually did a master's degree. But he explained, he said, when I was in college, I didn't feel like a customer. He said he basically talked about a lot of the things we've been saying about students not wanting to be there, him not learning as much as he could, him feeling like he wasn't learning a lot of practical things, all this. His degrees are in philosophy and economics, if I recall. And he basically said, I wanted to come up with an alternative. So that's how he got this group of people together. And he said, why don't I create an alternative where I can train people, give them some skills to start working, but get them actually in a place, and then they can work their way up and develop themselves and not go massively into debt in the process. He said, why don't I, it's that whole be the change you wish to see in the world and all that. And one of the things that really struck him, and a few other people have noticed too, is that there's a strange disconnect where all these people graduate college, I can't find a job, but then all these businesses are saying we can't find qualified people. So there's that strange disconnect. So he said, why don't I find a way to address that? And it seems like he did. I mean, it's not a huge company, but there's also another program. I'm not as familiar with it, but it's called the Thiel Fellowship. It's Peter Thiel, the founder of PayPal. They do something similar. And I told a friend about this whole thing, and he said he's like, wow, maybe I should start a company doing something similar. So I said, hey, why not? I mean, if more and more people start doing things like this, I think eventually a lot of these college programs, they're already becoming obsolete, but it'll really kick it in overdrive because people say, wait a minute, I could spend a little bit of money, learn these things, get a job. Do I really need all these years, all this debt, and then I never use it again anyway? That's the point. Yeah.
So here I got into talking about how the state has had a monopoly on schooling children for so long. They get you in that K through 12 system, and you're not allowed to have other private personal forms of teaching. Some places it's actually illegal. So people kind of default into that whole idea that, oh, after the K through 12, having this little choice in what I'm going to do, I'm also going to do it to college. I'm going to go to higher education and do much of the similar type of thing. So now coming to that, was talking to a mistake I had made throughout most of this conversation about talking about there was like 9,000 schools that we're focusing on, when it I think was a lower number, about 4,000, and they get into that now.
That up because we had discussed something about the high schools or something. It was something we discussed that mixed up with that number that was stuck, and it's actually it's more like 5,000. It's like 4,298 degree granting post-secondary institutions in the United States of America as of 2017, 2018. So I just wanted to say that in here. But then look, it's that now. For somebody to say that 4,008 a population of 90 million people, you're supposed to get all those people through just those degrees, and somehow only 4,298 institutions have been able to condense that information and produce it and supply it means in a location in a way nobody else can do it. There's no other competitive ways to actually teach people this information. That's complete fallacy. Like if you really believe that about the United States American United States American, if all this has resulted in a situation where only 4,298 grant people a degree good enough for them to actually be a productive member of society, it's just not. Why is it all that to you?
Well, it's also like that meme I always make fun of, that one about, oh, I'm not going to teach you this. This would cost thousands of dollars at a university. And my response to that is always, well, is it because the information is so valuable, or is it because the universities are overpriced? Again, I'm not going to ask someone to teach me how to be a brain surgeon on the fly, obviously, but if it's just critical race theory, intersectionality stuff, I can Google that in 2 minutes. Why would I pay someone tens of thousands of dollars to teach it to me? And the fact that people can't see that, I'm hoping that changes, because if more and more people sort of wake up to that, then that's how more things like praxis will come into being, and these old systems are just going to crumble.
I was trying to tell Stephen something that I thought of as he was talking about these things. Some people have gone through these schools and then they've actually gone online and seen all this other content out there, seen other people learn the things that they have for technically free, as much as you have for the internet connection. And then they wonder, why did I have to pay 4,000 a year or more? Let's say that's the average to pay to learn this, when I could have done this for free. I could have done this from home. I could have done this from my computer. And then they project that onto things like engineering, like mechanical engineering, like astrophysics and things like that, neurosurgery, like Stephen had said. Those things themselves are a different sort of field. That's an entirely different field, and that leads to the different earnings gap. These people think, well, I spent time, I learned these things for the same 4 years as the engineers, so how come they're getting more? But they're earning more. It's actually something they earn. There's more demand for what those engineers do, more demand for the physicians. Like Stephen and I making this video, we have to earn your actual attention, the time that you're going to choose to actually make this. People on this platform that's on YouTube, for example, like PewDiePie, or people posting like random cat videos and licking people's faces and things like that, those things earn a lot more attention and earn a lot more clicks, a lot more people watching that. Should I just say, just because I can post as many videos as PewDiePie, I deserve to have as much attention that you have? I should have some kind of universal free attention, like universal basic attention, universal basic interest. I can't do that. I can't just demand that. I have to earn that from you, and that earnings gap changes. Now, if I was teaching people how to make videos like I did, and somebody else was teaching them, PewDiePie started a PewDiePie University of things, he would be able to charge more for his university, for his services, if people are interested in actually getting eyes to watch their actual content. And there might be some things with PewDiePie, where it's PewDiePie himself as a character, you can't really teach some of those things. But that's neither here nor there for this thing. Now, getting back into where I was.
Low work, and they graduate and they think, I have this degree too. That guy was in college for 4 years as well. Yes, he was in the engineering class, but I saw him at the basketball game. I saw him in the cafeteria. I saw him in the bookstore. So why aren't I earning the same amount that he? But it's not the same thing, and I think that is something that we need to divorce ourselves of. We need to disabuse ourselves of that mentality, and I think that's part of why we're seeing some of this confusion and consternation and and said, yes, most of the things colleges are teaching should not. I agree with you, but I don't believe engineering courses should fail at the same point. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'll touch a little more on that below, but there one other company I wanted to bring up briefly is there's a company called Crash. This was actually founded by Isaac Morehouse as well, and Derek McGill. I've talked about him a bit. Is the CEO of it. He was the previous marketing director for Praxis. So I'm not ultra familiar with this company. I've just sort of followed them a bit, but my understanding is it's not really an apprenticeship. It's more sort of helping people to get jobs and all that. So there's more emphasis on value creation and propositions rather than relying on your resume. So you can pay a certain fee and they help you build an online profile. They help you make you do videos and other things that sort of showcase your work. And so far it's gotten some good feedback. Like they have a boot camp I saw that you pay like $120 for. I'm thinking about looking into that. So it's one of those things if you want to be able to stand out more in terms of looking for jobs. Or there was even, I think he even had some stuff about food service and doing remote work, which I found interesting because that could be something for me to consider as well. But find ways to sort of market and showcase your skills that'll stand out better to employers so you can make a career transition in life that you want, but at the same time do it in a way that plays off your strengths and builds on them. I think it's a very interesting idea.
Yeah, and that's another way. Instead of looking at, I was saying, instead of looking at for a better way for people to look for jobs, it's something in that I was trying to focus that people need to look for a better way to look for jobs, to look for work. You know, people think if I just graduate from college, if I just go there, I'm going to have something to employ me. But why? Why do they think this is the way things are supposed to be? That's the way to actually do it. There's many other ways you can actually get employment. And when it comes to this situation, the employers are your employees. If you're working for a big company, you're also they're also your employees because you're employing them for the facilities, for the clients and the people that they have, for the shipping that they have, for the content that you may have, for the marketing they have, for the skills that you may have. Just like they're employing you for those skills themselves while they're providing those other things. And then everybody else out there, your fellow employees, are counting on you to do different things. And there's this kind of teamwork type of situation there. Now, when it comes to this, what about the schooling system makes you confident in any of the things? What are the assumptions you're working on? What about students makes them certain that schools are the best places to actually educate them from a job? What about schools makes them actually think that the K through 12 system is the best system to actually develop people who can actually learn in the schools that we have? Now, that's even accepting that the schools that we have are the kind of schools that we should use that are best at actually educating people. But now, when it comes to businesses, people have also outsourced this, searching for talent, searching for employees, searching for people that can actually achieve the things that the business wants to have. They say, okay, yeah, the college, just get that degree, and then you'll be able to work for us. But it turns out a lot of people actually get hired out of college and they have to be retrained entirely. There's one meme talking about this. Like, oh, you have to forget everything you learned from college. And it's like, oh, well, I didn't go to college. And oh, you're underqualified to actually learn here. And it's like kind of a cat with like the loading symbol on it. That system, that's a general joke that's actually out there. And this is something that I thought of with the Carbon 33 teaching program to get the situation where when I have the studio up and running, that's going to be free content. So if there's people who are coming to use that platform to kind of do their cloud storytelling and help out in those things in different parts of it, there's going to be free information. This is how we work here. It's how some of us work here. Some other people might work in different ways, but this is something that you do. And I think there will be a demand for this for other people. Like for me personally, the more I learned about animation, the more I learned about films, the more I learned about video games, the more I learned about how those things came to be, the more I actually appreciated the actual content. Like I could watch something like Queen's Gambit and get past the fact that Anya Taylor-Joy is just a beautiful person, but just the entire production of everything coming together, the sets, the script, the pacing, the lighting, the sound, all these things to me were just very appealing towards that and have made me more into it. And you see a lot of people more interested into what companies actually do. And if you have this, if somebody learns from an actual company themselves, that company says, we're a company that is maybe a steel company. This is our story about how we make steel. This is some process of how to just find basic ores and things like this that you can find. Or this is a simple thing to do, put together like in this kind of way that you can do at home or things like that. You can come and actually learn on some days, on weekends or something in some kind of location on our site. That will get people more interested into it. This is free content that people can learn about it. And then from that, from kids learning those things as they come up, from people who want to actually be employed in that field, that can actually learn directly from that college, from the college that the actual business
offers, the college content, the information, the education that they offer, and then transfer that directly into working for these businesses. And that's something I can kind of see coming forward, and that's something that I'll be working on. And Sean mentioned that later. Now, getting back to the conversation.
All right, so that's it for potential solutions. I mean, there may be even more. Again, anyone knows any, feel free to comment or suggest. I think the way things are going, there will probably be more down the line too. More and more people are waking up to this, especially like we've been discussing with the lockdowns, as far as people are saying, wait a minute, I can learn all this. Why am I paying so much money? And also just if with the costs keep going up, people are going to eventually say, I'm not going to borrow this much money just to start working. It makes no sense. So again, I think it's the whole white pill thing as far as, okay, things are kind of messed up now, but I think the overall upside is pretty good. So, all right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, is there going to be
sorry.
a section you talking about the funding, the paying for them, the system in there? Because that could be one of the solutions as well. I think this is something that had come up in some conversation. Had some thoughts on it. Maybe I'll just drop it in here. But we just take the payment systems, as you'd mentioned with payments for, I think, praxis, you said, to after you graduate, or systems that come in where.
Now, he was suggesting a payment system over the schools where you have a thing where the schools themselves are invested in making sure you're actually able to earn money from what they teach. Where they could say in the system, for example, they say, okay, if you come and you take X class, we guarantee you it's going to earn you at least $50,000 a year for your first 10 years. So by taking X class, we're going to charge you $50,000 for the 4 years to take that. And then you're going to have to pay $25,000 while you're in school. And for that other $25,000 that's left, we're going to recoup that by taking a percentage out of your first 10 years pay. Since they project it to be 5,000, they'll do that percentage that is going to total to that. So I think my math again is garbage. But then they have calculators to help this artistically inclined people like I do, and this is post-production, so I can pause and check. So I paused and checked, divided 25,000 into 10 years, which is 2,500, which is 2.5% of a $50,000 projected actual salary. So if they say, okay, if you're employed in a field that actually needs this degree from the content that you've actually learned here, we're going to take 2.5% of your salary for the first 10 years. Now, if you're earning more, maybe they even get more because they're still getting that 2.5%. But if you're working in a field outside of it, then maybe they keep it at the 2.5% at most to recoup that thing. But if you're not actually earning that much, even if you're in that field using that thing, then you're still getting 2.5% tops. So if you happen to only get a job that gets you 20,000, they still only get 2.5%. Or maybe it starts if they only get that 50,000. So this is the kind of thing that would make schools, more invested in teaching people things they can actually earn money from. Because in the current system, people say, okay, we don't have jobs to pay back our student debt, so it's kind of putting on us. And it's a certain percentage of people, upper middle class people are normally getting, it's a majority white upper middle class population in the United States of America that takes on these kind of loans where they're not necessarily earning from it. Now that's an issue, but if you just wipe out the student loans, what's the incentive for the schools to do anything different? The way the schools work right now, once the actual student comes in, that federal money is actually the federal backed loan. 90% of school student loans are backed by the federal government now, by the state government, by taxpayer money. So when you have that situation, the kid gets in once they sign up, whether that kid learns or not, as long as that kid is still in school, they're getting that money. If that kid drops out, if that kid fails and doesn't actually get successful, the next kid is in, so the next money is coming in. That system is going to maintain. So how do you actually change this system?
Sort of thing. If you are interested in talking to politicians, talking to people in your neighborhoods, advocating for improvements, I think that's a more productive way versus saying let's just wipe out all the student debt. That's a more productive way because you wipe out the student debt if the structure is still there. They'll just do it again. They'll just start everything up all over again. So yeah.
Just think of the bank bailouts. They're going to keep behaving recklessly because they know they're going to get bailed out. It's the same thing with the student loan debt. They jack up their tuition. We loan them all this money. They can't pay it back. Oh, well, just forgive the debt. Oh, well, we'll just do it again. And then it's, oh, well, the economy will be better down the line. Hopefully they'll pay it back. Oh, well, bail them out again. It's just going to be the same thing all over again. I don't see another way out of it.
Yeah.
All right. So I was going to do some complimentary reading. I read an excellent article recently from New Discourses. That's James Lindsay's page for those who don't know. It's called, in parentheses, Higher Education is Destroying America by Alexander Zubutov. And this focuses a lot. I know I was saying that Cracks in the Ivory Tower didn't focus on the ideological bias in academia, but this article does. But it also makes the case that a lot of what's happening with the ideology and how it's taking over, how this is actually watering down education as well. And he provides some very good studies here, which show how this is actually impacting what students learn, how they develop, what it's like once they get into the real world, all these issues. So he essentially makes the case that leftism taking over academia has been destructive. Now, again, people will hear me say that and think, oh, you're just a right libertarian who's angry that you don't control the institution. Okay, there may be some part of that, but there are studies in here that prove this point. So I'll jump right in here. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's a fairly lengthy article. I highly recommend everyone reads it, but I just wanted to go through a few highlights because I think they're relevant. So he opens up with the Bill Buckley quote about how he'd rather have society run by the 2,000 people from the Boston phone directory versus Harvard's faculty. And what he means by that is because random people, they have a diversity of life experience, they have a little more common sense, all that. Whereas if you put a handful of academics in charge, they pretty much agree with each other on everything. They tend to group things on things. They lack common sense, and it would ultimately be far more destructive. So a lot of people hear that and think, oh, just some conservative guy mad at academia, but there is some reason behind that. And then next, he talks about think how much power these tech giants wield over our lives. Now, this was even before the recent stuff with Trump, but he was making the point that think about Google's algorithms, how people who don't look into this, they have no idea that Google controls what comes up in searches. They downplay other things, they censor certain things, all that. So people go on Google and search for things thinking they're getting some fair shake at what the information is. In reality, no, it's very controlled. But if one company has a near monopoly on it, well, it's going to be limited what you see. And of course, Twitter, you know how they've been as far as, oh, we're trying to keep everything fair, but Ayatollah has an account, Al Qaeda has an account, ISIS has accounts, but Trump, the president, can't be on there. So again, whatever you think of all these people, the point is there are a handful of people from Silicon Valley controlling our flow of information. And this relates to academia because many of them went to similar schools. They're all friends with each other. They hire people from the same school. So it's become its own bubble. I have to watch it again, but there was that debate Tim Pool did with, he was on Joe Rogan's show, and they did with the Jack Dorsey and the lawyer from Twitter. And Tim had some famous line where he said something like, you guys are so biased, you don't see yourselves as biased because you're so entrenched in that echo chamber. You think this is what everyone believes, and in reality it's what you and your circle believe. But because you control the information, you shut out anyone else. So you think this is the full story, this is what Americans want, but it's really not. It's its own bubble. Any thoughts or comments on what I've just said?
This video was was worse than the others. The issues in this one were a lot worse, and it's completely on me on this one, and I apologize for that, but thank you for listening. Okay, so the thoughts and comments I had on this was issues to do with self-interest. When you're talking about this, people look at certain things. Like think about the summer in Washington, in the United States of America, the very visual protests and riots and demonstrations that were going on there, the certain treatment that it was. Then whatever happened on January 6th in the United States of America, look at the reaction that happened between those two things. And people might wonder, what exactly is it? Why exactly are these things being treated in a different way? Why is the media coverage different? Why is the political action different? And that's because of who is actually involved in these things. When people were protesting about Black Lives Matter and things like that, or other kind of things like that, they say people in our community are being attached, so it's going to matter more to us. Why don't you people care? You're supposed to care about us. It's like, I understand people are self-interested. It matters more to you because it's happened to you. But when they look at other things, look at the cops. When a cop is actually investigating a murder, that's supposed to be what they do. But if a cop is actually killed, they go to a high level. Then it kind of makes you wonder, like, what kind of level are you working on for the regular times? Are you not putting that much search into it? But no, there's an aspect of self-interest that gets into that. So when people look at the schools and they think, oh, these people are outside of self-interest, no, they're part of the human condition. They have this self-interest. When you look at January 6th and there's laws and things like that being put in, they're arresting people already and all these things, it's not, oh, these people are white, these people are black, or these people have money, these people don't. It's who was actually attacked, who was actually threatened in this situation. The cops themselves, the police, the politicians themselves were the ones threatened in the situation. So they have the ability to do whatever it is in their power to try and address that threat. Just like when you are actually addressed. Sometimes for you, the most you can do is actually go out and protest. But that's the actual self-interest there, and we all self-interested. And that's the same thing with the schools. The schools have certain self-interest to maintain themselves as an institution, to hire the teachers, to keep the actual groundskeepers and things like that. Those people are self-interested in that whole system existing, and there's also a way to have these kind of systems exist with the result also being more educated people coming through that system. There is a way to do that, and I think the students have their self-interest, the teachers have their self-interest, the administration have their self-interest, the parents who are sending their kids, they have their self-interest, the colleges and the businesses and things like that that are getting people out of there and not actually training the people who have their self-interests. But that's the thing, if we can get to the point where we can understand and define that, accept that people have self-interests, and see if we can define those and find a place we can share that on, that should be positive for everybody else. Now, getting back into it.
Well, this next point here too is very interesting because he talks about there's a few studies talking about how much trust in media, politicians, and quote unquote the experts has risen in recent years. And of course, our tech overlords will say, "Oh, it's because of quote unquote misinformation," but reality is no. But reality is no. It's the fact that because of the internet, like the printing press versus the church, they're being exposed now. So Fauci flip-flopped on, okay, don't wear masks. Now wear masks. Oh, we're going to lock down this long. Oh, it's a lot longer. BLM protests don't spread COVID. Oh, they actually slow the spread, but protesting Second Amendment does increase the spread. It's like all these double standards, hypocrisy, and of course, I mean, I've harped about it a million times now, but all these politicians saying, "Oh, go inside," and then of course Gavin Newsom, Lori Lightfoot, Pelosi, Mayor of San Francisco, Mayor of San Jose, the list goes on, going out and breaking lockdown. And then on top of it, also with the elections, oh, Hillary's going to win, 96% chance. Oh, it's going to be a blowout. No one's going to vote for Trump, all this. And it's just, whatever we complain about the general public being misinformed, people are not this stupid. They know they remember these predictions and they compare it to what happens. And with the internet, a lot of people now, that's why meme culture is taken off, because people convert this into a small format that's easy to bring up, easy to post. So it's, here's what they said a few months ago, here's what they said now. And then people say, oh, this is misinformation. No, you're just being called out on your lies, dishonesty, hypocrisy, and shifting of the goalposts. And because of the internet, again, like the printing press, well, now there's other sources of information that can expose that. Whereas in the past, you had academia and a few news channels, so it was tightly controlled. But it's just the people in power, they don't want to lose that control they have on the narrative. That's why they're acting this way. So it's just gaslighting anyone who questions it. Any thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, there's been something that's been occurring where people have been persecuting people about what happened in the past, and right now with the changes happening, with some of the content that I've been talking about, there's a good chance hey, I might just have my channel removed from a platform like YouTube. But then I'm looking at other sources, getting a locals page up, getting my personal website up, carbon33.com. Check out some stuff there. There's going to be more coming on there. I'll be talking with Stephen about doing more of this series. We're getting into the human action series, finding different platforms, getting a Mastodon server. There's other means, just the same way with education. People want education. The education system doesn't work. It doesn't mean we're just SOL. There's other people doing other things. We can find other things. And if the aren't other people doing them right now, by the fact that all these freed, all these people are leaving these platforms that are not this tunnel vision focused. Let's just go K through 12. Let's just go 4-year university. Now that people are let's try all these different things. New education will come, just like the same thing with this informational thing. People will start saying, okay, now what are the different platforms? What are the different means to still achieve the actual things that we want from these actual places? The people created countries, created states to actually serve actual purposes. Most of the people who actually go out there and vote.
So I was saying most of the people who go out and vote think they're doing something good. They're doing something positive. Whether it's, like I said, they're self-interested from themselves, but they also want to do it in a sense that hurts the fewest number of people in general. So they look at that and they think, yes, this is a system. And that's a similar thing with the Ivory Tower. People look at the Ivory Tower, they look at the Cathedral, and they can see the cracks in that system. They used to think this was the best kind of schooling, but most of the people who want the schooling will find different ways now that they know this. And this is one thing that I was pointing out that is least good about this time, seeing these different changes happening, the exposure that has happened, specifically under someone like Donald J. Trump, as the President of the United States of America. He's got into a situation where people are more aware of certain things right now than they were in the past. And that to me has been the main thing that I've supported him from, is his way to show people certain things that were unseen.
4 years ago than were 10 years ago, and I think that's good for the world. I think that's something to be excited about.
Definitely.
Yeah. Oh no.
So he says here, the reason for the problem is simple. The quote-unquote educated have become a stale, stagnant monoculture, a culture within which groupthink reigns, within which prejudice predominates, bad ideas go unchallenged, and the worst ideas get insulated from scrutiny by strictly enforced social taboos. In fact, the more quote-unquote elite the quality and quantity of education people receive, the more herd-minded, prejudiced, and intolerant of dissent they become. The danger of this predicament is not just one for political conservatives to bear. When a diversity of ideas is choked out by years of ideological indoctrination and forced conformity, when thought police control our public and private spaces and factual claims and ideas remain untested in the crucible of free and open debate, the resulting harm is borne by all. As I will explain in what follows, the ultimate issue springs from a tectonic shift in the complexion of our educational institutions. It will not be solved until those educations are shaken to their very foundations and remade from the ground up. So you could even argue, I don't even know if it's that they'll be shaken and remade. They may collapse completely and just new things will spring in their place. Like the old way of doing things is dead. It's not reform them. It's shut them down, do something different. I would personally say that's the only solution. Again, keep college for some things, but this thing we're doing now, no, it has to end either again by a bang or by a whimper. So now I'm going to get into a few things he cites that prove. Sorry, you had something to say?
So here I was saying that one thing I appreciate about reality is it is what it is. If something doesn't comport to reality, it's going to fall apart eventually. Like the truth is the truth. Facts are facts. Whether you care about them or not, it is what it is. And that's something to really appreciate, that eventually reality wins out.
So now I'm going to get into a few of the studies he cites to prove this point. This is why I found this article very interesting, because again, I always complain about this ideology, but he made some studies to prove this point. So like people will say, oh, this is a myth, this is conspiracy theory, but no, there's evidence for it. So a study in 2019 by the polling and analytics firm called PredictWise, which is actually retained by The Atlantic, that's a pretty mainstream publication, for the purpose of analyzing partisan prejudice, found that a high level of education was strongly correlated with political intolerance. The Atlantic reported as well on prior research from the University of Pennsylvania professor Diana Mutz that had concluded that, quote, white, highly educated people are relatively isolated from political diversity. Sounds like some people I know. And that, quote, people who went to graduate school have the least amount of political disagreement in their lives. Mutz's explanation was that such people are less likely to talk to those who disagree with them. Now, again, I kind of have mixed feelings on this, because I personally, I think you and I, Silas, and with some of my other friends as well, we're in that position where we agree enough on things that there isn't conflict, but we still disagree, but we can handle it where we actually learn things from each other. Whereas with a lot of these people, from what I've observed, it's just agreement across the board on everything. And that goes to that point about the stale monoculture. Yeah, you have all these minority, female, gay friends, whatever, but if they agree on 90+% of stuff, well, that's not diversity. It's just you're holding up the superficial diversity to try and show you're enlightened somehow. So
yeah, there's one thing in there as well. I mean, just throw this in there. It's the as you're talking about being secluded, being certain people, they'll say that those people, many of those, some of them will say, but we're intolerant to fascism, so we don't care. And okay, yeah. I was intolerant to what Hitler did, but I still read the Third and the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich to try and understand what he meant. I'm intolerant to somebody saying, who is it, Bell Hooks or somebody who said that, but I would read the actual article and the actual source to see where she was coming from on that. Yeah. Like actually engaging with something doesn't have to agree with that thing. No. It's a situation, and we're going to see this. We're going to see. We think cancel culture was bad. We think echo chambers were bad. You see a re-entrenching by people on the political left who ostensibly should have now thought they won and be in power. I think they will continue. They will be even more unfriending. There'll be even more of a demand to not associate with people that don't agree with. They'll get even further into the echo chamber. They'll even tune things further. And it's going to be unfortunate for them because we live in a time when there's such a glut of information. There's just such a wealth of information and things to learn and experience out there that to see people just fill up like they are, it's I don't know what emotion I feel anymore with it. I used to feel kind of sad or upset or something. All these people, like, there's like a phrase that people have access to, other people don't have paper, never owned a book, and these people choose to just not pay attention to it. It's a kind of a strange thing, but hey, to each their own in that extent. But yeah, I don't know. I'm happy for the people like you, the people listening, and like to engage because there's more than enough of that out there. Yeah.
Yeah. So a 2019 study by the More in Common Project that analyzed the accuracy of people's perceptions about their ideological opposites reached similar conclusions. Among its notable findings was that, quote, the more educated a person is, the worse their perception gap. So in other words, their view becomes distorted and they tend to attribute extreme positions to those on the other side. But the one critical exception to the finding is that it applies only to Democrats, not Republicans. So they go on to say, while Republicans' misperceptions of Democrats do not improve with higher levels of education, Democrats' understanding of Republicans actually gets worse with each additional degree they get. The effect is so strong that Democrats without a high school diploma are 3 times more accurate than those with a postgraduate degree. So you think about it, that kind of makes sense because, yeah, if you're a Democrat kid in college and you know a few Republicans, okay, you may have disagreements with them, but at least you know who you're talking about. If you go to academia, it's all just Democrats all the time. You associate with the opposition less and less. You're going to start creating this caricature of them in your mind and start attributing motives and assuming you know what they're like and all that because you don't deal with them directly. You've heard about them from other people who have an agenda against them. So, but the fact that it actually gets worse with more education, that's not the sign that people are getting education. It's a sign of indoctrination. I think that's fair to say. We sort of touched on this in the last series on one of the previous videos, but he says here, has education always cooked up an oversaturated brew bubbling over with an overpowering flavor of left ideological extremism? No. Pew Research findings found from 2016 that a widening ideological gap was forming between 1994 and 2015. So basically what it's showing here is that the more time people spend in school, the more likely they're coming out left leaning. So in 1994, 1% of those whose education stopped after high school were consistently liberal, while the number was 4% with some college, 5% with college graduates, and 7% for post-grads. So in other words, from about 1994, the more time you spent in college, you were slightly more likely to go left over time, but it wasn't dramatic. By 2015, it had become a gulf. 5% of those in high school or less were consistently liberal. 12% were consistently liberal in college. 24% were 24% were in college, and then 31% more were liberal postgraduate. So, and then, but by contrast, the percentage of down the line conservatives was about 6 and 11% across all college categories, with no particular correlation with education to be found. So a lot of people who were conservative in college stayed conservative throughout. However, they say that this leftward shift came at the expense of moderates, and they moderates or people who identify as having mixed views. So they said it used to be that 53% or less of crowd had ideological mixed views in 94, and 48% held mixed views in 2015. And let's see here. Sorry. 53% of the high school or less crowd had ideological mixed views in 94, 48% held mixed views in 2015. And that number had declined from 38% 94 to 24% in 2015. So in other words, the moderates are sort of thinning out, more and more people shifting to the left, numbers of conservatives are staying about the same. So that definitely proves there's something going on in academia. And I think that this was the study we cited in the previous one, but they talk about how in the 1980s, like as late as the 1980s, they said about 39% of college faculty were left liberal, 34% were conservative, the rest were moderates. So it used to reflect the national average. By 1999, 72% of faculty and this is 81% of humanities faculty identified as left liberal, 15% were conservative. In 2018, it had gotten even worse. They said here that they surveyed, what was it here? Registrations of 8,688 tenure-track professors at top liberal arts colleges. 78.2% of the academic departments had 0 Republicans or so few as to make a difference. Of course, fields like Africana studies and gender studies didn't have a single Republican. And they say, of course, and also the administration itself, I think I touched on this in the previous video as well, that a study of 900 college administrators found out that 71% identify as liberal, 6% identify as conservative. Because some people have made the argument, well, left-leaning people are just smarter, so they advance in academia. But the argument here is, well, no, if the administration's overwhelmingly left-leaning, they're going to hire people who agree with them. That's not rocket science. Same thing happens with media. Any thoughts or comments before I continue?
Yeah, and again, also just putting academia across the board, it's also not all literally rocket science. There's very few things in academia that are really that challenging when it comes to actual levels of academic rigor. You know, some things that, like, and I'm saying this as somebody who majored in graphic design. Like, it doesn't take intelligence, high levels of intelligence, to be a graphic designer. It just doesn't. And most of these degrees are liberal arts that are not really that rigorous and challenging when it comes down to it. And also at the same point, those 4,200 schools we're talking about, are you saying the exact courses Harvard is teaching is the same? An English major from Harvard is exactly the same as an English major from Keene State? No, they're teaching different things. So this whole, oh yeah, we're just smarter. No, that's not the case whatsoever. There's been the things we've seen with the scandals with Lori Loughlin, I think Aunt Becky from Matters, with things like that. People complain, oh, these people they just in college because they have money, because of the legacy and things like that. So those people aren't getting in just because they're a lot smarter than other people. So there's a complete fallacy to what some of these people say. Like, they're not to be taken seriously. And there's one thing here, I think we touched on this in the previous chapter. I think it was chapter 8 or chapter 7 or something. We were talking about this, and something came to me, and we mentioned this, how they're in an environment where they're told to expect certain things. They look at the schooling environment. In college, you just pay for this, everything. Room and board is cared for. If you're living on campus, you're told when to go where, how to do what, when to do it. You have your friends around. There's events being organized for your pleasure, for your joy. There's sporting events. You get to a certain quality of life. The quality of life that an average college student has is a much higher just general quality of life and mental. I know there's stresses that people have in interpersonal relationships, but outside of the life, you know what you're going to do for the next 4 years pretty much, as long as the money keeps coming in. You have a job to go and learn. There's kind of new things happening every time. There's new classes, new information, new students. You're in a protected area. You're not trying to fight every year to like worry about how I'm going to keep my job. Am I going to keep you're in there as long as you just do the bare minimum of keep that GPA. And it's not like you have to exceed in it. You just have to do the bare minimum. You just have to not fail out. In some cases, you don't even have to show up. You still get those things. So that's the environment they have in college. And then they get onto the world and they're like, you lied to me. You lied to me, world. Like, the world is not at all like this. But now taking it further, K through 12, it's funded through redistribution of wealth, through a socialistic system of economics. Property taxes come in, they pay for everything. That system is in there. Now you go even further, when you have the teachers who are in power, you have the administration, you have a lot of people who are left-leaning, and they might not, now it's gotten to the point where it's actually in the actual teaching material. But you see these people, you hear them comment, you know how these people are, you start picking up cues. What does the teacher object to when people are talking about? If you're talking about leftist type of things in general, the teachers will laugh with you. But if somebody brings up something about America is great, they'll point out that person. That is being taught, and that's, as you said, 90%, right? Now those people graduate and they've had.
So I was talking about how you go through K through 12, you go through most universities in the United States of America, and you talk to the people who are voting, you talk to the people involved in the people in the power structure are leaning to the political left. And that stuff bleeds into the actual curriculum when you talk to the teachers, when it's outside of free time and things like that. There is that. Even just a simple thing like when a teacher actually decides to answer back in a certain way when some ideas are brought up in a class or some topics happen. So that generally happens. People start to get ingrained in their mind that the people in the power structures are left-leaning. oh yes, there's some access to other people to talk, but it's left leaning. So once they come out of that system and they see that in the world there's actually other ways of looking at things, it might even be close to 50-50 where there's other people, they get some kind of shock and like, how are there this many people? And then it feels, in comparison to that mostly left environment, that this other world environment where it's this more typical division in actual ideas is more antagonistic because there actually is an increase of people who seem to be against what they believe is actually the way things are.
This next study I find really interesting here. This was actually done from SUNY New Paltz, which is actually not too far from where I am now. So it was actually sort of based off of some work that Jonathan Haidt, the author of The Righteous Mind and The Coddling of the American Mind, which we talked about before, did. Now, what's interesting here is this study, they actually had trouble publishing it because of the political implications. This is pretty interesting here. So here's what they found. So they interviewed 100. It's not a huge sample size. It's 177 academics in a variety of universities about their political orientations and personality characteristics as measured by the Big Five model of personality. So for those who don't know, the Big Five are openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So they measure those, and then they also ask them to assign weights to 5 possible different priorities here. So the priorities in academia they came up with were academic rigor, academic freedom, student emotional well-being, social justice, and the advancement of knowledge. So what they found is not surprising, but it is disturbing. Left-wing professors were significantly more likely to place a higher value on social justice and student emotional well-being than were their conservative colleagues, who tended to place a higher value on academic rigor and the advancement of knowledge. Now, the author here, Zubitov, and I are saying, to be clear, this is not us saying left-wing professors don't want students to learn. We're not making that argument. We're just making the point that if they're more concerned with social justice and they're more concerned with students' emotional well-being, they're going to shield them from certain things. They're going to cover up certain things. They may lie about other things. And I think having this information about these personality traits out there, it shows that we have a right to be skeptical of academia, because then we wonder, how does this impact the scholarship and what's also being taught in class? And then what they also found here is also that we're seeing, of course, the leftward shift in pre-college education as well. 79% of lower education teachers lean left, they found. 87% of high school teachers lean left, and 97% of English teachers lean left. And he gets into other things here, like teaching the 1619 project. We did a whole series on that. I'm not going to talk about it here, but things like that, which aren't actually history. So it shows how corrupt academia has really become. And to sort of add on to this study, one point that I found interesting here is they found that the trait of agreeableness is positively correlated with a preference for social justice and student emotional well-being, and negatively correlated with academic rigor and the advancement of knowledge. So this could be interpreted in different ways, but of course, what I would say here, and I've seen this in my own life, is that a lot of social justice-y types, they're the types that they're not. I used to say they're not principled people. I think they are principled, but the principles are being liked, fitting in, getting approval from the group. So what's a little scary here today is that if you have academia full of people who go with the flow, who don't want to dissent, they just want to be liked, they want to fit in, well, it's going to be, academia is going to become stagnant, because there aren't people pushing back. There aren't all these people doing their own research, arriving at different conclusions, comparing side by side. You may have a few people doing that, but a lot of people are just going with the flow because they don't want to be disliked. They don't want to be ostracized. They don't want their funding to be cut, all that. So if you have, he says here, because liberal pro-social justice dogma is unquestionably an ascendant orthodoxy at universities, while dissent requires real intestinal fortitude, it makes total sense that those who are most agreeable are most likely to follow the herd. From this standpoint, therefore, the disturbing aspect of the role of agreeableness in these research results is that it signals that many academics are not so much joining a dominant consensus due to their independently reasoned conclusions as they are, for fear of bucking the tide, reflexively hopping aboard a bandwagon, and in the end adding dead weight to what is fast becoming a sinking ship. And this was probably the most interesting part of this to me, or at least one of them. And I was saying, this ties into how this is impacting academia. Again, it's not even a question of just whether I agree or disagree with the left-leaning stuff. The author says later on, and I would say too, I don't want academia to become a right-wing or a libertarian echo chamber either. I want all these perspectives to be taught. But the concern is, if it's just all these people with these views, they hire other people with the views, they all agree on everything, how is knowledge going to develop or advance? It can't. It's just going to become basically this intellectual priesthood where it's more about following dogma and getting ostracized if you don't. Thoughts or comments before I continue?
Yeah. I'm just realizing that the internet connection has been on a different router, which might have been part of the issues. So yeah, I was just thinking about just the as you mentioned in that.
Okay, so as you can see here is when I finally noticed the actual issue that was having with the connection. Sometimes it's just a bad connection. They have different internet service providers than Steven does. But with this central thing, when you're using something like Skype, that one location is getting both our feeds. And then it gets both our feeds, it records the video, then I can download the video, then I can come and edit it. But if my connection is low, then I see his actual feed coming, being sent to me from the Skype service in a way that's kind of negative. It seems like it's skipping, but Skype is getting an excellent feed from him because his connection is stronger. He's seeing some things and he's being a champ about not telling me. We're talking about a different way where we can maybe like send types, but if he's typing to me and it's slow, it's still going to be an issue. But what I was kind of getting at here was that most of the time we actually want to understand each other. We want to communicate, but there's issues like hardware issues, communication issues, language issues. Some of the issues you can actually change and adjust yourself. Like right here, I was thinking, okay, we've been speaking for an hour and a half. Should I stop and should we restart the whole thing? It's like, no, that one happened one time when I forgot, when I thought it was recording, it wasn't recording. But in this situation, I decided, let's just keep going. And then after he gets back here with more of a response, I decided, no, let's just actually stop and take a pause, and then I can restart with the actual better connection, and that will be on part 2.
Well, and I also make the point, this is one of these things where I talk about this stuff and people say like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist or whatever. I'm getting so annoyed at hearing that, by the way. But my response to this is look, I don't think there's some conspiracy. Like, I don't think there's some committee that meets in private and says stack academia only with leftists and shut out anyone else. I think it's more the radicals from the 60s went to school. They got jobs in academia. They mentored a lot of people. Angela Davis comes to mind. They hire people who agree with them. If you don't agree with them, they either retaliate or those people just leave on their own. That's why a lot of libertarian and conservative academics work for think tanks, not academia. And then it just becomes a self-reinforcing thing of, okay, we hire people who agree with us. We create our own bubble. Anyone tries to come in, we kick them out or they leave on their own. And as you know, this has been happening in media with Barry Weiss, the New York Times, someone at MSNBC, Glenn Greenwald in The Intercept, the list goes on and on. They insulate themselves from anyone who will criticize, scrutinize, even people who are mostly on their side on issues. So then if you try to change it from the inside, it's a massive uphill battle because you have to fight all these entrenched people who are trying to preserve the bubble, essentially.